When do you say goodbye to a friend? When do you have a friend breakup? How can that be holy? How do you know if someone just doesn't want to be your friend? Like, how do you handle that emotion when someone is kind of ghosting you?
I think sometimes when you're clinging onto it so tight, you make the friendship worse by suffocating it because you're like, no, this friendship has to work out.
If you haven't made plans within 24 hours, you are never going to get that lunch or that coffee.
Let's call a spade a spade. And this person doesn't want to be my friend.
There's a lot of bitterness in my friendships where I would kind of hold records of wrongs. And I was like, I'm showing up, I'm doing this, I'm caring more. And then I feel pathetic. Do I need to have like this friend breakup? Or do I just need to refine my circle and kind of just put them in a place where the Lord has me to love them well, but not to trust them as much? God's just done using that friend in that season for you. You have to walk away. Just remember that you will never have to beg to sit at a table the Lord has prepared for you.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Happy and Healthy. I am your host, Janina Amapola Ward, and welcome back to Season 6 of the podcast. As you guys know, I've been working relentlessly to get on some awesome guests this season, and let me tell you, I have such a fun guest. She's actually been on the podcast once before, and this girl is a powerhouse of a woman. You probably know who she is. If you're looking at the title, you definitely know. She is an author, a speaker, and an incredible writer. Her name is Grace Valentine. Welcome.
That was like the kindest introduction. I need to just like have that as my alarm. You know, like, wake up, Grace Valentine.
I could have gone longer, to be honest.
You're
I was scratching the surface.
Thank you so much. It's so fun to be on. Happy and Healthy was a podcast I had listened to before we were friends. And so it's so funny that, you know, the full circle effect.
I love it.
So honored to be here.
Well, thanks for coming back on. I know you live in Atlanta. You've written like 30,000 books at this point.
A lot of mini books, a lot of real books.
How many books have you written at this point?
My 5th one is about to come out. Well, 4 regular books and then 1 devotion.
Let's go. Yeah. Y'all, she's amazing. And I feel like you are one of the few people I can really think of that's truly speaking into like college students and like younger, Gen Z, I guess. Would you say more Gen Z? Would you say that's your demographic?
Yes, a lot of college students. Every now and then a little bit post grad and a little high school too. But so definitely like that, like late teens to 20s, but definitely a lot of colleges because I go to a lot of sorority houses to speak, which is so funny. I'm like, would y'all hate me if I was in college? I'm like scared, but then I'm like, oh, the nicest people ever, and they have so much to learn. They're so eager. So yeah,
I love it. You're also one of the funniest people I know. Like I remember when Caleb and I came to speak at your retreat, and it was just so cool watching you like do that. Like I felt like you were in your element. Like girls were just dying laughing over you. Like you're funny.
Oh, that is like actually my favorite compliment. It's like great when people are like, you're a great writer, but when you're like, oh, you're funny, I'm like, thanks so much. I enjoy using humor and also relatability, to be honest. I think that's also, you know, like sometimes your strength can also be your weakness. So I'd also say my weakness is having no filter. But then God can use anything for his glory. So sometimes he can use my no filter for good as long as there's still self-control and gentleness. Yeah. But sometimes it gets me in trouble. But it was so fun having you at the retreat. And you were such a powerhouse too. I think you forget what a great speaker you are sometimes because you do so many things, but you are a great speaker and connector with people.
Do you ever get like nervous when you speak? Because I get so nervous every single time. And I thought I'd be over it.
I get nervous when there's high schoolers randomly. I don't know if it's like my inner athlete in high school comes out it's honestly with college girls because I can see their brokenness. I've always prayed before I go to speak, like give me the eyes of the Lord so that I have a heart where I can see the one and not just see the group. Because when you see the group, you get scared. So sometimes when I walk into like a high school speaking engagement, I'm like, oh, these were hard days for me where I was bullied. And that comes out. But I also feel like the Lord's protecting me. But I do bad about posting things on Instagram of my face. Like it's just so much work. I get stressed. I get insecure. So what I think is cool about like you and me is we both know what we're good at and we like strive for that because that's what we feel called to, but we're not trying to do everything. Yeah. Like, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. Like, and you have to like pray about it. So I'm like, I don't feel called to do some of the stuff you do, but I do feel called to like write lots of books and put my writing online. And so that's the cool thing about just kind of figuring out what you're good at and also what you're passionate about. Because every time I've tried to do things that are not a calling, it always ends up sucking. And so I've had to just be like, wait, I do like speaking. I do like writing. And I started to like it to know it for Christmas. Horrible. I was like, this is so hard.
Wait,
I didn't know how many people
even said like it to know it.
Is that not how you say it?
It's like to know it.
Oh, I literally added
so
up my position. I tried, and I was like, because someone showed me. I'm like, this could be a good side income. And I have some links, but then I was like, I am not a link girl. And then I go back to your links, and I'm like, okay, thank you, Janine, for linking what I should buy.
I also have some help doing that, but otherwise, it's not like
You've always been fashionista though, and like very talented at finding deals.
I appreciate it.
It's a hard.
I don't know. Going back to what you said, it is so true though that you can't do everything. And I think that's the problem is our generation, like I give props to our generation. They want to try everything. And I'm like, try everything. See what you like. And if you fail, that's okay. But I realized too, like I love speaking. I will still speak, but I've realized that this is more my lane. And I'm okay with that not being my strongest suit. I used to beat myself up and feel really insecure about it. And even Nicoletta was like, that's good. Like it's good that you know that's not really like your lane and that now God has called you somewhere else. And I also feel like if you try to do everything, something's going to suffer. Like something is not, you can't do everything excellent. You know, like you can pick 2 or 3, but you can't do everything excellent. So this is just my verbal processing of things I've learned.
The comparison is so real in any industry, and you see what's working for one person. Like whether I have a friend who does sales, and one of my friends who does sales is the most energetic, like easy to cold call. She's like hustling that way. Another one of my friends is a lot more diligent, not as outgoing, but they're both successful in their fields because they know their giftings and they don't try to be someone they're not. And so it's like if you try to wear pants that don't fit you or a dress that doesn't fit you, it's going to come off weird.
Absolutely.
And so I've had to become and have peace, and I ended up succeeding more. And the goal is not success, but when I'm doing what I feel called to do and what I know I'm good at, and I'm confident in who I am, and I'm also okay with who I'm not. Like, okay, I am not this fashionista, and that's okay. That's great. There's other people who are great at that. Like, I'm not good at even making reels. Like, my reels look so weird, and so, but I can just post Canva templates with quotes, and I love that. And you find that.
But that's amazing. But that's the thing is like, there's someone for something everywhere, and like you know your strengths, and you know where you excel. And where you excel, I probably don't excel. I cannot write as much as you do. Like sometimes I'll be scrolling, I'm like, dang, how does she write this much stuff? Like I'm so genuinely impressed, but also like what you're saying, like I have a lane, you have a lane. And that's just the beauty of, you know, God's kingdom.
Pump out podcasts.
We celebrate each other,
yeah,
you know?
Amen.
Okay, so but you wrote a book. It's called Better Friend.
Yes, The Better Friend.
The Better Friend.
Yeah, it's about 12 truths to shift from one-sided and shallow connections to vibrant friendships. And it kind of came out of a season. Well, I've moved multiple times at this point. I even just moved to Atlanta a year and a half ago. And being in your 20s, friendships feel so weird, and even 30s and 40s and even in your teens. But especially, I kept feeling like I was a better friend. There was a lot of bitterness in my friendships where I would kind of hold records of wrongs. And I was like, I'm showing up, I'm doing this, I'm caring more. And then I'd feel pathetic. And I would always wonder, am I going to get the kind of friendships that I give? But the truth is, I had to feel convicted about that feeling and realize that wasn't from God, that at the end of the day, we are called to, in Romans, says, outdo each other in love. And so I shouldn't be holding a scoreboard. Love holds no records of wrongs. That's scripture. That's what love is. But at the same time, I had to learn how to love radically like Jesus did, but trust wisely. And so that was what this book came about of, you know, when do you say goodbye to a friend? When do you have a friend breakup? How can that be holy? How do you know if someone just doesn't want to be your friend? Like, how do you handle that emotion when someone is kind of ghosting you? And how do you not feel pathetic when you have given more and a friendship doesn't give anything in return?
Gosh, the last part is so real. And especially when you get into your 30s, like I'm going to be 31 in March, which is terrifying. But I think that's something I've learned so much is like the older I get, the more I'm like, I don't need to force friendships. I don't need to force, if this person is not responding, they're not initiating, they're not, you know, even just giving me anything. I'm like, why am I trying so hard to make a puzzle piece fit where it's just not fitting? And I feel like in my younger 20s, and maybe you feel the same way, you would try so hard. I'm like, maybe I need to call one more time. Maybe I need to reach out one more time. Maybe I need to text one more time. And I feel like you get to a point where you're like, okay, let's call a spade a spade. And this person doesn't want to be my friend. And that's okay. But that takes like so much self-work to be okay with that because it does feel like rejection, right? How do you like handle that? Like, how do you feel when someone has kind of rejected you friendship-wise?
Yeah, I mean, I remember even moving to Atlanta. I went on a friend date with a girl, and we went and got sushi, and we did the whole, we're trying out the friendship. And then I remember texting her, getting to hang out, and kind of didn't hear anything. And I laughed because I didn't feel the friendship spark either. But then I was like, dang, I just got rejected. Like, she does not want to be my friend. And at first I felt pathetic. pathetic, and then I felt weird, and then I was overthinking everything I said. And then honestly, I finally prayed about it. And it's easy to jump to conclusions, and someone doesn't answer a text, and suddenly you think they hate me. They're already telling everyone I'm weird. I put my foot in my mouth. I did everything wrong. She thinks I'm a loser. But instead of jumping to conclusions, it's important to jump to prayer. Because if you want true wisdom and discernment in a situation like that, where you don't want your feelings to become a god and an idol in the moment, but you want truth into your heart, you're going to have to go to the creator of truth and the author of truth. And so important to pray when that happens, and to also just remember that you will never have to beg to sit at a table the Lord has prepared for you. That if you are begging and trying to push down people to get to this cool table, to get to this group chat, to get to whatever it is, it's probably not for you. And I don't know if you relate to this too. I used to want to click so bad. Especially even when I moved to Atlanta, it happened again. I was like, I want a girl group with 3 guys, 3 girls. Like, we have sexual tension and fun times. Like whatever it is. Like, I was like, I want it to be this cool thing we have going on in a group chat where there's memes, there's fun times. We all go to church together. We care about each other, have dinner parties. And I'm an individual friendship kind of girl. Like, I like one-on-one. I don't do well with just a clique. Like, I seek community. And I think that's all of us, truly. Like, you may have a friend group, and that's a good thing to have. But a clique, even in your 20s, is possible and will distract you from true community. And so finding a body of believers, and especially, I don't know if you remember this, when you go to college, you just are so excited to find your best friends. And so I remember in Welcome Week being like, who are my bridesmaids? Like, who are going to be with me for life? And then I had a moment where I had 4 best friends, and I realized I didn't have a dance floor. Like, you need, yes, your bridesmaids, but you also need 100 people that you would also want to celebrate the covenant of your marriage. And so even if you are married, it's important to realize, hey, yes, I'm seeking bridesmaids, but I also want to seek a dance floor community. And when you stop clicking yourself off, and usually when you get disappointed with the ghosting because you've clicked yourself off and you prioritize maybe only a couple people, but when you find community, you'll have it all.
I don't know. What do you think about cliques? I feel like cliques are kind of icky.
So icky.
Because especially when you get older, it's like not cute anymore. It's almost like a high schoolery thing where it's like, I don't know. I feel like there's kind of an attitude where like, oh, you can't sit with us because you're not in our clique. And I'm like, at some point, we're too old for that. We're not doing that. We're not excluding. We're not, oh, you're not in our core 8 group, so you can't come. Like, I just don't think that's even godly. But then I remember too, also wanting that like guy girl group, like we're so cool. And like, yeah, exactly. We go on trips together. But eventually too, it gets really messy with the whole guy girl dynamic.
Completely.
Way too messy. I don't know if I recommend that to people.
Even like Friends is a messy show. You're like, I want that. I'm like, do you really want all that drama that we had? With Ross and Rachel,
true.
On and off. Like,
that's usually, I feel like, how it goes. But yeah, I feel like the more you get older, the more you also become okay with your group becoming refined and smaller. And that's actually pretty painful. Like, I'm looking at this tree in the corner. Is that an olive tree? I think it is. Really? It's like a faux olive tree. Faux. And yeah, faux. And it just reminds me that like the Lord, like even like these branches that I'm looking, like God will cut branches off, which are people that are not refining you and helping you grow and helping your tree blossom, aka looking more like Christ. Because not everyone in your circle, like they're not bad people, but they may not be the people for you. But that process of pruning is really, really hard. So what would you say? Because like you wrote about this in your book. How do you know when a friendship it's time to go? Like it's time to end, it's time to fizzle this out. And how do you go about that? Because this is really awkward sometimes.
Well, I think also what's interesting is Aristotle has a philosophy on friendship, which, Aristotle wasn't necessarily known for his theology, but I think it's something good that we as Christians can still take with us. And he said that there's 3 levels of friendship. There's friendships of pleasure, friendship of convenience, and friends of goodness. And so I think a lot of times when you have disappointment in friendships and you're wondering if it's time to let go, you have to see, like, maybe I think of this friend as a friend of goodness, but I need to separate myself a little bit, and it might be a friend of convenience. So a friend of convenience could be a coworker or a neighbor, someone you do have to see a lot where you don't want to have this big friend breakup, but you need to put them back in that box of the friend of convenience and not the friend of goodness, because you are going to become like your friends of goodness. They're going to be the ones filling you up. They're going to be the ones that you are around all the time. They're going to be the ones who are influencing you. And sometimes you have friends of pleasure, and that might be a friend who you work out with, or you have certain things you do with. That's the setting of choice. It could be even someone you see at a club or a book club, but you don't ever have that one-on-one time. And so I think especially you have to decide, like, do I need to have like this friend breakup, or do I just need to refine my circle and kind of just put them in a place where the Lord has me to love them well, but not to trust them as much. And so like loving radically yet trusting wisely means that at the end of the day, like you're going to still hopefully tell this person about Jesus. And I remember one time when I was struggling with this, you were so good. And I was like, what do you do when people want to get like lunch and you don't really know them? And you're like, oh, I go. And I was like, oh, you're so sweet. I guess I should. I feel convicted now.
It depends on that.
Yeah, you have to, use discernment. But you challenged me in a great way in that moment of being like, hey, like I am never going to be better than to getting lunch with someone new. Like, and when I moved to a new city, suddenly I was hoping someone would get lunch with me. And so you can be a blessing, but you don't have to be a friend of goodness. And so that's also something important. But when it is time to walk away, when you have that discernment and saying like, hey, they're constantly talking about other people, they're probably talking about me. Or you get that, I always say this girl gut, but this God gut, that feeling that God puts in your heart being like, hey, walk away. And when you're consistently in prayer, God will give you this discernment to feel these feelings that are not feelings, but they're truth and the discernment. And when you have those moments, it's important that you listen to it and you listen to God and you do it and with clarity and peace. And that it might be uncomfortable, but like God is a God of peace, not confusion. Like if you're confused, if they like you or not, if you're friends or not, if they're making you better or not, consistently and not just in a certain season because they're going through something, that's probably a sign from your God gut to walk away. And also I want to say you can have a friend break up or walk away from a friendship and it doesn't mean there's a villain. Like in Acts, there's two people and they were two people doing big things for the gospel. Paul was one of them. And they disagreed on one thing that came to where they were going next. And they had a big argument and they ended up separating. And actually the best thing for the gospel was for them to not be friends anymore. Like they both went and preached the gospel to two different groups. And then they were like, I thank you all the time. And so you might have a friend who, hey, God's just done using that friend in that season for you. You have to walk away. Y'all are doing different things in your life. And it doesn't mean that there's an enemy, but there is a clear choice to walk in a different direction. And that is also a blessing.
Yeah, that is so good. And I feel like what you're kind of saying is there's different friends for different reasons and then also different seasons, which is so true. And there's friends where, you look back and you're like, I have fond memories with you. I'm so thankful. I have nothing against them, but I just don't feel like we're going the same path anymore. And that can be kind of sad and painful for maybe someone on the receiving end that's like, oh, dang, I thought we were closer, but you just don't feel that connection anymore. But I really do feel like when you can let your friends be open-handed, like your friendships be open-handed, where you're not, I think sometimes when you're clinging onto it so tight, you make the friendship worse by suffocating it because you're like, no, this friendship has to work out. We have to be best friends. We have to do everything. And the other person might feel that where they're like, oh my gosh, like this is way too much. I don't feel that way because like that person might have you in the category of, you're just a fun friend. And then they might think like, oh, we're best friends, And I think that's where it gets a little awkward. And like, would you say if someone sees you as closer than you would see them, would you have a conversation with them or how would you go about that?
I think you have discernment if there needs to be a conversation. But what I love to do if there's someone who I don't have the capacity to be that friend of goodness, but I know someone else who I think that they would be great friends of goodness with, is I love connecting people. And so when you connect your community, because they're still part of your community, even if they're not part of your like best friendships or your tried and trues, sometimes I'm like, hey, I think y'all would really get along. And because chances are they're not even obsessed with you. Like we would love to think like, oh, wow, everyone wants to be friends with me.
Yeah.
Like I look at my own life. It wasn't that I was obsessed with this one girl wanting to be your friend. I just was lonely. I just wanted someone. I wanted someone to see me and care for me because when we feel like we're not seen by others, we fail to see the God who sees us. And so in those moments, I look at the need and I say, hey, you can come to church with me. Like, hey, here's a cool life group. Hey, here's this other friend I know who has the same hobby as you. And I've watched some friends who I just was living in different towns. I didn't have the capacity to be that long distance forever friend. Then they find that friendship with each other. And that is such a blessing to see. And that is something Jesus would do. Like Jesus didn't maybe like on this earth, he could do everything, but he also knew when he could help push people up to take that role. And when he left and went to heaven and rose from the dead, he had all these other people create the body of believers that started spreading the gospel. And he needed them to rise up and have those giftings and connect other people together.
That's so good. I also love that you use biblical examples because I feel like we do talk about friendship a lot in the Bible, and I know like Jesus was friends with his disciples and he walked with them, but I forgot about that specific Bible example. I think that's really good. Have you had a friendship breakup? Like one that exploded and went really bad, or like have you ever had something like that happen?
I have two that come to mind. I have one where there was someone who I truly thought was one of my best friends for years. Like we had even made like the 6-7 year mark, and then she got a boyfriend. I want to be like very careful how I talk about this.
Yeah.
And then the boyfriend and her were on and off for a little bit. Like now they're doing great. And it was a little different where, things change. Like I was single. I was in a different phase of life. And sometimes people say, like, that won't change friendships. It won't change all your friendships, but it does change some of them. Like, if you are not stable enough at that point,
right,
then it does change the relationship in some sense. And I just kind of got to the point where she kept calling me up when she needed something. I was the one going to visit her. I felt like she was getting very emotional. I remember kind of constantly feeling very on my toes. Like, am I doing something wrong? Like, did I offend her? Is she mad at me? Like, what do I need to text her? And I remember it was like around 2020, I went to see her one more time. And that was the moment where I was like, I'm giving too much at this point. Like, I can give grace, but I'm giving excuses when this friendship is no longer helping me grow. Like, this friendship is only causing anxiety. It's only confusing me. And our friendship breakup was just kind of like a slow fade.
yeah.
And I think that was the best way that God helped me mourn that privately and with other people. And then got invited to her wedding, see a picture of her baby, and I still get to comment and pray. And like, I pray for her to do well, but we just weren't meant to be. And I think at first I was mad. If you would have asked me when that was happening, I'd be like, she left me for this boy. She always complained about me. She never showed up. But now I have the perspective years later where I see it really wasn't that deep. It just was not meant to be at that time. We weren't compatible. And I'm so much better to be able to pray for her on the sidelines than I was in her heart. But I have had friends where I've been really betrayed. And like, that's one of the worst feelings. When I had a roommate I was living with, I found out she was talking about me. And another friend had my back and said, hey, I need you to not trust this girl. And I realized, wow, this is someone who's like living with me. Like, this is very hurtful. I'm now on my eggshells. And I talked to her and I was like, hey, this is what I've heard. And I appreciated she never denied it. Like, she never said it didn't happen. She just said, I'm sorry you heard that. And we still had to live together. And I think I had to come to a point where I realized, okay, at the end of the day, I saw her worst sin, but so Jesus has saw my worst sin. You know, like, I've done way worse things to Jesus than she did by talking about me. However, I don't need to trust her again. Like, I don't need to invite her to my wedding one day. Like, I can pray for her. But I did have to bring that up into the air because it was going to affect my everyday. I was living with her. Like, you may not always have to approach someone about it, but it is also was more for me than it was for her because it gave me the opportunity to forgive her. Like, if I would have just allowed it to make me bitter, I probably would just gossip about her for years to come. And that's also my sin. And so that was important for me to realize.
But that's so important that you recognize, like, okay, I have to do this self-work. I need to separate. I need to do my part. Because I think in, our world and our worldly flesh, we want to go and retaliate and be like, okay, well, I'm going to get back at you, or I'm going to post about you, or I'm going to whatever. But like the spirit side of us is like, okay, no, pray for them, which is so hard. And the Bible literally says, pray for your enemies. And not that she's necessarily your enemies, but an enemy is someone who would, be spiteful towards you or talk against you. And it's really painful. And I'm sure your flesh was like, screw this girl.
Yeah.
I'm out. I want to egg your bed and throw
egg your bed. Yeah.
Literally, like, make her wake up and
you're never getting toilet paper again. Like, I'm just going to take it out every time.
Throw her mattress out the window.
Have you ever had a friend break up?
Not really. Like, no, actually I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have. And it was really ugly. This was so many years ago. And it was kind of a guy situation. Also heard her talking bad about me. I tried to resolve it, tried to pray, tried to write a letter to her, and she just was like, she just stopped responding. And so it's hard when it's like, okay, I've done my part. And like, even to this day, I've still like, I see her stuff. I still pray for her. I don't have anything against her, but it was so painful at the time. And then again, you just realize like God is seeing things that we don't see. Like, I love that quote, God hears things that we don't. Amen. So we don't know what that person's doing behind the scenes and how God's protecting us, or maybe was like, I'm trying to end this friendship for you. Like, I'm trying to look out for you. But man, it sucks. That process really sucks.
And you mourn it. You mourn it like a heartbreak. I remember, you have to look at that Bible verse where it says, like, God is near the brokenhearted. So yes, you're in pain, but you have to realize this is an opportunity for you to get to know God's presence more. Like, you might feel a little lonely, you might feel uncomfortable, but God is also near you, and He's in your future that you're worried about, creating friendships that are even better. But you don't need to sit and bang at a door that the Lord has obviously closed.
So true.
And I think that was what gave me the peace. And once again, I look at that friend that I had to break up with that was more like peaceful, and even the other friend that where it wasn't peaceful. And God is working in her life regularly and all the time, and He's working in my life. And almost reminds me too of Sarah and Hagar. They were two women who were around each other, and Sarah was really mean to Hagar. And Hagar was the one who named God the God who sees me. And Sarah had Hagar had every reason to run away completely from her, but God called her back to Sarah, and Sarah still was always mean to Hagar. But God still was working in Sarah's life to have a miracle. So I think you have to also celebrate when the person who did you wrong gets a miracle, or they get married and they do well, because it's easy to be like, they don't deserve it. But at the end of the day, we deserve nothing. And so if Hagar got to watch Sarah, have Abraham, then sure, we can find joy when even the people who have done us wrong are succeeding in life, and we should pray for it to happen.
Absolutely. Okay, that was actually my next question, and something we talked about beforehand is navigating friendships when your friends are in different seasons than you, because that is so real. It is the inevitable part of life, is that you might be single and your friend has a boyfriend, or you might be single and your friend gets married. You might be single and your friend's now on to their first baby. I have friends like that in my life where, they were in my wedding and they're my same age, and like I'm having my first kid and my friend's still single. And thankfully, like my friends have been so supportive, but I'm sure, I felt this way. I'm sure you felt this way where like you went in a season where your friend had the thing that you wanted.
And it refines you and it shows you, what are my priorities? Like, do I love this person because we're in the similar stage, or do I love this person because they're in my life?
Exactly.
And I definitely know that feeling. My best friend, she's on her third kid. Like, it's so crazy. Like, we were in college together, and I'll never forget, there was one time her and my other friend were getting ready for this fraternity formal, and I was so bitter. Like, I hate the person I was in that moment. I was so jealous that they had more guy tension. I was jealous they were going to this fraternity formal. And that same night, she went on like this fraternity formal and met the guy who's her husband, like mother of three. And I was writing that night, like writing my first book that ended up becoming my one where I had the least amount of followers, but it sold the most. And so God is so creative. I think people forget his creativity, that you are never going to be missing out on something. Like, God does not withhold any good from you if you're walking upright. And so I had to realize, hey, I'm not going to let jealousy win. I'm going to walk upright. I'm going to trust that God is creative and has a plan for me, and know that it's different than her. However, I do think you have to realize that friendships do change in that situation. So me and my friend, she ended up moving to Orlando. It was great with her husband. If I had something going on, wanted to tell her first date stories, I might have to go to her house and there'll be a baby running around,
right,
folding laundry together. Way different life season. Like, news is playing, and I'm like, I haven't watched the news in like forever. It was just very much more of a different phase. She had to also understand that financially, I was in a different place than her. Like, she had a dual income, she had a husband providing for her, and she was working. And so financially, I'm not going to be able to do all these fancy things that she can do. So we both had to give each other grace and empathize with the situation and understand where they're at. But I also have friends where it does change, and it's easy to be sad about that. But also, it's important too, at the same time, to find friends in a similar season. Like, hold on to the ones that are the friends of goodness that make you better and who will be there for you. But if it consistently is someone who keeps forgetting about you, give them grace, assume the best. But if it's overall a long time of that, like, you need to find some single friends too. Because
right.
I remember finally I had two random roommates, and like Miley and Ramsey, like both single when they came to live with me in Orlando. All my friends are married. They're all way younger than me too. I had to be like humble enough to be like, yes, a 22, 23-year-old is living with me, and I'm in my late 20s. But it ended up being one of my best friends now. And so you can't let it stop you from finding new friendships, because you're still like trying to make all these friendships stay the same. Like, those single friends could give me more in that season that I needed than some of my married friends were, even though they're lifelong friends.
Totally. No, that's so good. And I think too, like I know selfishly we all want to be in the same season as our friends, and that would be obviously this like answered prayer, but that's also just not reality, that you're going to get a boyfriend at the same time as your best friend and get engaged at the same time and get married at the same. That's just not realistic. And so I almost feel like it's a test of life regardless, because regardless, you have to learn how to celebrate people no matter what. Like, this is going to happen. This is not going to be your first test. This won't be your second test. This certainly won't be your last. So how can somebody continue to celebrate their friend when they're getting the thing that you want or that you pray for? And I love that you're just, again, bringing up biblical examples and knowing that like God has all of us on a different season and a different timeline and a unique timeline and a unique purpose. Like, God doesn't wire us all the same, and God doesn't wire our timelines all the same. And so I just want people to like, that are listening to this, just like relinquish that control and trust God with your timeline, because God hasn't forgotten about you. God sees you. He sees like, okay, this is really hard, and it is hard. I'm going to empathize with you, but knowing that like you'd want your friends to show up for you too. Like, you'd want someone to celebrate you the way you'd want to be celebrated. Okay, that's my soapbox on that.
I can't say one more thing on that.
Yeah, please.
What's interesting too about jealousy is usually when we're jealous of someone, it's the people we're closest to. It's our friends. It's the people we're constantly around. Like yes, we get jealous of random people on the internet, but then we unfollow them, hopefully, and then we feel better. But we're jealous of our best friends. And there's a proverb that says anger and wrath are cruel, but jealousy is even worse. And so the idea that the Bible warns us that the feeling of jealousy is even more icky than being angry, like at your friend's ex-boyfriend or the person who is not at all your best friend.
Right.
And so it's so important to be icked out and grossed out by jealousy and to identify it as jealousy. To realize like, hey, I'm being a hater. Like I'm not supporting this friend well in this season. I'm critiquing her, but I know that my true heart and where this comes from, like what explains it is my jealousy. And I know as a friend who was always a single friend, I had to do that so much in my life and realize, wait, I'm jealous and this is gross. Like I don't want to be this friend. I want to be the friend who's celebrating. I want to be the friend who is so excited for the wedding, throwing them showers. And that helped me a lot when I said, I'm going to be the most like celebratory friend. I threw all the baby showers, even in my small house. Like it was so fun.
Yeah.
And that is the best way to get rid of jealousy and just being aware of how gross it is.
And I think people notice that. Like they notice when you could be the jealous, bitter, angry, frustrated friend, and yet you're the one who's like, I'll host. Like, I got this. I'm showing up. I'm sending you flowers. Like people notice that. And it is the sweetest thing. Like my single friend, she's literally coming this weekend. She's like, I want to come before your baby's here. I'm going to come for your baby shower. She's literally like flying in and like that intentionality. I will never take that for granted. Like, I don't need anything fancy. Like, showing up for me and flying in twice is like the sweetest thing ever. Like, that's like my love language.
And checking in on your emotions in a very vulnerable season, too. Because you're in a big life change, too, where when someone's going through a big life change, and I think we forget because we kind of think like marriage and babies are the goal, you have to also really check in on those friends because there's a lot of emotions that come through that. There's a lot of things that Satan is going to attack when someone is getting married to a Christian man or someone is having and trying to raise Christian babies. And so as a friend who's single, you have to give them grace if you feel like they don't fully understand the dating scene. That's also something I've had to do with my friends when they'd be like, why don't you just do this? Like, and I'm like, hey, you got married at 22 and it was beautiful. I loved it. Great wedding. But you don't know what it's like at this age, and that's okay. But you do have wisdom because you have the Holy Spirit, and so I still need to listen to you. But especially with friends like that who are, hey, like, I know this is a vulnerable season. Like, I'm going to show up for you in the way you need. Like, that's just so cool.
No, I love that. Okay, but your book, though, is How to Be a Better Friend, The Better Friend.
Yeah, it's how to handle when you feel like you're the better friend. Like, how do you handle that feeling of being pathetic and that you're trying hard, like when it's a one-sided friendship, how to identify better friends in your life, and then how to be a better friend. And so there's like 12 truths throughout it, and then each like chapter has like a 7-thing list, which is kind of fun. I love lists.
I love that. No, honestly, I love super practical books. I don't like when it's too like heady because then my brain starts floating in the clouds and I'm like, what did I do?
12 truths.
What did I read?
List. Simple.
I'm a big list girl.
Big list.
But so you talk about actually, shallow friendships. How do you get out of those shallow friendships? And like, I have my own thoughts, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah. Well, I want to hear your thoughts.
What's a shallow friendship and how do you get out of that?
I think shallow friendships can be, when we think about the Aristotle thing where this friendship of pleasure and friendships of convenience, if you're constantly having small talk and then you get disappointed because those people end up not showing up for you, like those are shallow friendships. And those aren't bad to have in some way. Like it's good to be good at small talking. Like it's good to be a kind person.
It's a skill. It's a hard skill, actually.
It's a hard skill. It's good to have those simple friendships, but it's the classic, hey, we should totally get lunch. And then you never talk about it. You just let it happen.
So true.
I saw someone post on TikTok recently that if you haven't made plans within 24 hours, you are never going to get that lunch or that coffee. So you should make it your goal. If you bump into an old friend, you say, we should get lunch. Plan it within 4 hours. Shallow friendships can be also centered on partying. I look at a lot of my college friendships where, we don't talk anymore. And the reason we don't is because we only talked when we were putting on crop tops and going to SAE. That was what bonded us together. And so, like, crazy, wow, I can't believe we don't have a lifelong connection. It's because our connection was trying to get boys together. And there ends up being drama and confusion because your ultimate goal isn't to better each other. It's to try to get better boys or to try to get a better college life. And it's not to be a better friend. And then also shallow friendships can as simply be as when you're like in that different season when jealousy comes in because it's so prideful of us. We have to realize that when we are jealous, even when that one person has always gone their way and always had like daddy's credit card and got married young, when you are thinking icky thoughts on that person, like you are being a shallow person and you're being prideful, and that's not going to make them better or you better.
Yeah, that's so good. I also feel like conversations When I think about shallow friendships, it's like you leave and you're like, they never really got to know me more.
Oh, that's my pet peeve. People don't
That
ask you questions in
Oh
return.
my gosh. I one time made a TikTok about it and it blew up because I guess so many people resonated, but then a lot of the comments were like, well, I just have social anxiety or I have, well, some people even said they had autism. So I was like, okay, I'm respectful of that
Yeah,
one, of
no,
course.
like,
But I feel like social anxiety, like I get it to an extent, but it can't be an excuse forever because
mm.
at some point, like your friendships are never going to go deep if you never ask a question. Like, how are you going to know who your friend is? Like, what's made them to who they are, their family, their upbringing, their background, like what they're interested in. I just struggle so badly with sitting down. Like, when someone asks you to get coffee and in your mind, you already are like, no, 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 because you know that you're going to be the only one asking questions. Those are the ones where I'm like, I don't know if I want to
You're
do that.
speaking something so into my heart where I even tell like my boyfriend all the time, like this person did not ask me one question again.
Yeah.
I remember there was a season in my life where I was meeting a lot of new people and I remember being like, this is so even arrogant of me. I'm like, it's gonna be really hard to explain my career to these people. Like, what am I gonna do? Like, how am I gonna explain it? Like they were also like a lot of people who weren't as like active in Christian circles. And then I realized, wait, no one's asking. Like no one's even I had talked about everything and no one has asked me. And I think in some ways you have to assume the best, but that is also as a believer, when I'm in circles like that, a lot of the times the times that happens the most, granted, there have been some church groups that are the clickiest, most, they will only talk about themselves and care about themselves. But most of the times it has been in circles where they really don't have a grasp of who Jesus is as a friend. And if you don't know who Jesus is as a friend, it's hard for you to be a good friend. You may know the religion side, you may know all that, but if you don't know who he is to you as your personal savior and friend, then it is so easy to be lost. And I'm like, so I have to come with sometimes those friendships that are a little more selfish, that are shallow. I have to realize, hey, they're a friend I'm on mission for because I want them to know Jesus. And I may have to low-key show them what a good friend is and hope that they learn, but I'm not on mission with them. And so I'm going to love radically, but I'm going to trust wisely and realize that I have to be prepared for this coffee to be an emotionally draining conversation where you are giving, because that is like a youth pastor meeting with a youth girl and you're on the clock because you care so much about this person finding Jesus, and that's what it ends up being. And I'm sure that happens to a lot of us people listening, and it's easy to get bitter about it, but I've had to, for my own soul, like give that to Jesus and be like, okay, I'm on mission for this person. I'm praying for this person. I'm praying that this person will ask me a question about my faith. Like ask me something about me and my personality. It doesn't have to be about my job. It doesn't have to be about my family, but even if they just ask me something about my faith because I make it so obvious, then I'm taking one step forward.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes like you just lead by example. Like sometimes people just they don't know what to ask or they've never had that upbringing where like maybe their parents did or they had other people around them asking the questions. And my best friend Riley, whom you know, Riley
I
Sewell.
love Riley.
Actually, no, sorry, Riley Kehoe. She is one of the greatest question askers I've ever met in my life. And I would say prior to meeting her, I was the person, like I would ask questions, but it wasn't anything like that amazing. And sometimes like you need someone else to lead by example. Not that you immediately cut this person off because I'm just not like pro, like, oh, just cut them off because they didn't ask me a question. That's lame.
Yeah.
But Riley led by example to where it grew me. And that's why you usually do want to have people that you find better than you, quote unquote, better than you to refine you and sharpen you and teach you things because of being around her, I was like, wow, I have a lot of growth in this, or I want to be a more intentional question asker. And so I just think as a pro tip for anyone out there, like think of questions that you can ask your friend that are maybe different or not just like, how was your day or what'd you do today? Like ask them, like follow up on things that they're struggling with. Hey, I remember you telling me that you applied for a job. How's that going? Like, are you still struggling? Like really be thinking about that. Because I think that makes you such a better, more intentional friend when you especially remember things that other people typically forget.
I actually have a whole chapter. One of my lists is like 7 questions to ask. Like,
Oh, I love
that. I had a dinner club and we were all such great friends. And there'd be times where we can't help when you put 4 girls together. We're either talking about other people or talking about ourselves. And so when we realized we were all gossiping a little, we're like, why don't we reframe these questions and these conversations? And instead we started cheering each other on and asking each other questions, like going around. And those silly youth group things like high, low, like what's, your rose, bud, thorn,
Yeah.
those things are like cheesy, but sometimes they help framework because if you put girls together, we're going to either talk about other people or we can talk and lift each other up. And so you have to identify those moments when you're getting distracted. And I love what you said about Riley, because Riley is one of the best people. Like, I met her like within 10 minutes. I feel like she already knew so much about me because she was so good at asking questions.
Yep.
And I truly think looking at the fruit of the Spirit and identifying which friends are strong in each one, because obviously you're going to bear all of them as, Christians if you're rooting yourself in God, but there's love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Like, I have some friends who are so good at their faithfulness and like their quiet time and their scripture reading. It inspires me to be better. I have some friends who are so gentle. They will tell you to be better and call you up, and you will feel like it was the best thing they said to you. Like, they can use gentleness. I have some friends who are self-control, who never have ever drank too much alcohol, never made the same mistakes I have, who are so great with boundaries with their relationship. And so finding friends who highlight each one of those really well and embodying them, and also encourage them in that and say, hey, I see this in you. And then even ask for their tips. Like, for my friends who have been so great with their faithfulness and their Bible reading, I'm like, so what do you do? Like, can we do this together? Can we go somewhere? And without realizing it, you're not just going to be inspired, you're going to be changed by them.
Oh, that's so good. I like that. I think that's so important because each of your friends have something different that they can contribute and bless you with that you can learn from. And like Riley is an example of someone who crushes Sabbath. That girl will disappear from her phone for like 3+ days and she's just like, bye. And I'm like, how did you do that? Like, that is the hardest thing for me to do. So she constantly is a reminder to me of like, okay, I should probably get off and spend time with Jesus without my phone. So shout out to you, Riley. But okay, well, Grace, this was such a good podcast. Where can people find your book? I'm assuming everywhere books are sold, but is there a specific place you want them to go?
Yes. Well, you can go at the Grace Valentine on my Instagram. Click the links in my bio. It's on Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Christian books, local bookstores. And so really excited for The Better Friend to come out.
You're an amazing writer. I'm super excited to see what God does. And you're also dating someone.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
So
his last name is Friend, which is also so funny.
Oh my God.
So I signed this book deal before I was dating him.
Wait, is his name Matt?
Yeah, Matt Friend. And so it's just funny because he's like, The Better Friend. When every time he's with his family, he goes, we're talking about me on The Better Friend. Like, they all make jokes now. And I'm like, I signed the book deal before him. It was but that feels like another little God wink.
Yeah, it is. I've never met anyone with that last name, Friend.
I know, it's almost like too good.
So unique though. I love that.
I remember even, it sounds crazy to say, like, once again, one day, which hopefully we don't ever break up, but if we did, I'd be like, Janine, cut this out. But I remember praying always, like, for whoever the guy was with. There was a girl in Texas. Do you remember Chandler Best? Do you know who she is? She had this wedding video, and my single self was crying. Like, we were listening to this at 26, where she said she prayed for God's best over and over again. And then she ended up marrying a guy with last name Best. And I messaged her and I was like, hey girl, I need that. I have no hope out there. Like, and I remember she's like, just if I could give you any advice, it's pray like specific. I can never say that word. Specific prayers, whatever. Okay.
Specific.
The certain type of prayer. And I like looked at my little prayer journal I started when I was a kid that I kind of gave up on and praying for like who I ended up being with, which once again, don't know if it's him. And I always pray for the best friend. So I was like, that's what I'm going to pray with this. I remember saying out loud, there's no way his last name would be Fred. So it's just such a God thing.
That
The book's on friendship.
Crazy.
He's like an amazing guy and so fun. And has more friends than I could ever keep up with.
That's my husband.
He's in Breckenridge right now. Yeah, Caleb is like
I'm
that
like,
too.
how the heck do you have this many friends?
Which is rare for guys, because guys don't also sometimes like to make new friends. They'll have their high school friends, but Matt will always see someone new and be like, want to come over? Like,
it's so cute though. I love that.
It inspires me to be better.
Oh, I love that. He's your better friend. Actually, he's best friend?
Yeah, I guess. One time I wanted to post that when I announced it. I wanted to be like, my best friend. He goes, don't say that. Don't friend zone me just because my last name Friend. I'm like,
my hot friend.
Like,
I don't know.
My hot friend. The cutest friend I have.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited for you. And thanks for coming on the podcast. This has been so fun. I'm sure you'll be back on down the road. And they can go follow you just at Grace Valentine?
Yes.
Okay, go check her out, you guys. Thanks so much for watching today's episode. I really hope this helped you guys out. I know friendship is really hard. I totally get it. Especially the older you get, it's like, where do I meet these people? How do I meet them? Why is this so complicated? That's why we're here to help, and hopefully you can go check out Grace's book. So thanks so much, Grace, and I'll see you guys next week for another episode of Happy and Healthy. Bye, guys.